stretch for impact. We're going to zoom out in a way and think about how we support our clients in context. We come from such an individualistic societal mindset these days. It's very easy to kind of focus in on the individual and sort of make people believe that if they just think about themselves and work on themselves, they can do anything they want. And actually that forgets that we are embedded in social and environmental structures. And if we don't think about the systemic structures that we exist within, we have limited impact. We might have knowledge, but we're not having the wisdom to actually achieve change. How do we bring that kind of dual lens that yes, we're thinking about individual agency and how to create change, but we're also thinking about how to do that realistically and wisely within the systemic context. Moving beyond entity thinking. Entity thinking is the name I've given to the dominant implicit belief that the unit of survival and the unit of flourishing or success are located in a bounded entity such as an individual, family, team, organisation, nation or species. So he's really talking about here how since Darwin and this idea of evolution, of the survival of the fittest, that we in the West have moved into a kind of mindset that thinks that when we think about evolution and survival of the fittest, we're thinking of one entity, like one species or one tribe, rather than recognising that there's a much wider system that every individual, team, organisation, family, tribe, community, nation exists within. And some of that's been surfacing a little bit recently with the sort of far-right political narratives around a Make America Great Again, got some of the Brexit narrative, this kind of tension between individual state and wider global economic community. What we need to do is start reclaiming the wisdom that actually indigenous cultures have always had, that the unit of survival is organism plus environment. We need to remember some of that kind of ancient wisdom. And some of that's been coming through from science, in multiple spaces, in multiple different disciplines. So, for example, we've had scientists realise that trees, for example, they may look like solitary individuals, but actually they share resources through what's been termed the Woodland Wide Web. And I think it's a really helpful model and a really helpful illustration of how we need to be thinking about our coaching clients, that we may have an individual before us, but we're not, when we work with an individual, actually just working with an individual. We're working with an individual within a wider web of systems, relationships that interact and interconnect with one another. And this is where we link then to this idea of stretching for impact, that we are not going to just be thinking about what can our clients do in isolation, but where are the levers for change within the wider system? Where is the system open to influence? Where is change maybe almost needing to be just unlocked? And where are we going to partner with the process of change that's looking to happen anyway? The two tools then that I'm suggesting that you practice for yourself, but that you can use with clients in this area, are one, mapping the system. So taking some time to think, okay, not just as an individual, but what other individuals are you probably connected with in your team? How then do those individuals relate and interconnect with one another? How does that team connect with other teams? How do the other teams connect to one another? How does that how do those teams exist within the nested system of the organisation? What other systems does the organisation interact with? And you get a kind of a broader map, call it a systems map, of really what the whole system is. And sometimes you do that and you realise actually something that could be much more macro might be actually blocking change in the micro. And so you might need to shift your attention to thinking, well, what can we do to try and make progress towards unblocking that change or that resistance? Linked to that is force field analysis. Now, this is a really practical way to help clients think through what are the drivers for change and what might be opposing that change. Whenever you're trying to create change, remember there's this concept of homeostasis, which we've touched on before, which is that organizations like to stay in balance. They like to stay in the status quo, really, just like the body likes to try and stay at a sort of constant temperature. So whenever you're going to try and drive a change, there's always going to be resistance to that change. And another way of trying to enable change to happen is not just by driving up the power and the force behind the driver for change, but also to try and dial down or disarm or weaken the resistance to the change. The second idea I want to introduce is the Pareto Principle. In our activities, it's often a very small fraction of what we actually do that generates the lion's share of the impact of the results that we're trying to achieve. And so the Pareto Principle, also sometimes called the 80-20 rule, or the rule of the vital few versus the trivial many, is a really helpful lens to bring to help clients reflect on what is it that I do that actually has the biggest impact, and how can I become more and more focused on that, taking time to reflect, to think, where am I going to have optimal impact? Doing the right thing is actually better than doing the ineffective thing or the low impact thing.